Hilchas Parah Adumah Perek Shvi. Now we learned that there's you make the afer of the Parah Adumah by burning the parah, and then you have to draw the mayim chayim from a mayon or from the Haris HaMoishkin or from Shar Hayamim. You get the mayim chayim, and then you take the afer of the Parah Adumah and you put it onto the mayim chayim, v'nosno of mayim chayim al keli, and then there's the hazor from this mayim chayim on the tmei mes, and that's the process of the Tara. So the Rambam is going to say, learn over here in Perek Zayin, that the mayim chayim could become puzzle through malacha. Work puzzles the mayim chayim, and the work puzzles the mayim chayim sai if you do work while you're drawing the mayim chayim, while there's the mili of the mayim chayim. During that is also work puzzles, and also even after the mili. So if until you actually put the afer of the Parah Adumah onto this mayim, so the person that's his mayim, or that he's responsible for this mayim, his work is going to puzzle this mayim. So if a person, for example, goes ahead and draws mayim chayim in order to be used for the afer of Parah Adumah, so if while he was drawing it he did malacha, so that malacha caused the psul in this mayim, even after he drew it, he has the water ready. While he was drawing the water, there was no malacha done, but now he's holding the water and he's transporting the water, and lepel is doing malacha before the water got Efer Parah Adumah on it, so his work will cause a psul in this mayim. Now, b'medvar mamurim, if we're talking about that it's his water and he's responsible for the water, but let's say if a person draws water for someone else, so if a person draws water for someone else, so while he's drawing the water, so since he's doing the act of drawing the water, so his malacha would invalidate the water, would cause a psul in the water. But once the water is drawn, so now it's no longer his responsibility. The water was drawn for someone else. So memela, it's that person's responsibility. So the malacha that this person is going to do, the person that actually did the drawing of the water, but right now it's no longer his responsibility. So therefore, his malacha won't cause a psul. The malacha only of the person that owns the water will do a psul, unless there's another situation which we'll learn b'hamshach. You could give over your water to someone else to be responsible for. So if you go ahead and you tell someone he should be responsible for your water, so then that would also cause that lepel, your work won't invalidate it. But faket, his work will invalidate the water, as we'll learn b'hamshach. Perek Shvi, hamalacha piselis b'mayim kedem sheyiskachu. The water that was drawn from the mayim chayim, and before there was the kiddush, which means before the afer of the parah was put onto the water, so that water could become puzzle through work. However, ve'ene piselis ba'azah, the sprinkling of this water, when you sprinkle the water onto the tmei mes, so work during the hazah doesn't cause a psul in the mayim. And udvar meilu divrei Kabbalah, these are divrei Kabbalah. The Chazal learn out this psukim, the meinido, the mishmeres. We learn out kolpan. We learn out a pasuk that the water has to be the mishmeres. It has to be ba'efen, that there's no malacha being done. Al derav yapara, the Parah Adumah. Masha'enkim, once the afer of the Parah Adumah was already put on it, so then malacha doesn't invalidate it. And al deraz and ba'azor also doesn't invalidate it. Called dvarim elu divrei Kabbalah. Case. Hamemali mayim lekiddush. Someone that was being memali mayim in order to do the kiddush to make chatos. And lepeil v'nisasig b'mlocha acheres b'shas hamilu. While he was filling the water, he did another melacha. Oy b'shas hilochas hamayim shememali. Or he already was memali the mayim without work. He was transporting the water, and while he was transporting the water, he did some other work. Oy. You know, as he was pouring, let's say, this water from one keli, the water was drawn in with a small keli, and now he's pouring it into a larger keli. Either way, while the water, it's his water, he's responsible for the water, and he does work, so Mele is pasla. La'olam hamalacha piselis b'mayim, the malacha always passes the water, until you put the afer onto the water. However, then hitler sefer, but when you put the afer in, v'niskachu, and the water became mayim kedoshim, like we said before, mayim kedoshim bechatos, and v'nasu menida, they're called menida. So then, eina malacha piselis b'm. So the fact that you're doing malacha doesn't passel this water. Ella hamelech hamayim kedoshim, someone that's transporting mayim that's already kedoshim. Or he's pouring from one keli to another keli, mayim kudoshim, which already has the efer of the par adum on it, and v'huesik b'melacha acheres, while he's transporting it, or while he's pouring from one keli to another keli, he's esik b'melacha acheres, ein bekach klum. There's no problem at all. V'chein mazim mehen b'yodi achas, when he's sprinkling the water on someone that's a tmei mess, so he could go ahead and sprinkle with one hand. V'huesik b'melacha b'yodi acheres. That also the malacha is not a problem with the hazah. The malacha also is not a problem. But again, the mechatos, which already became menida, which means it already has the efer of the paradoma in it. That's the din number one. So a person that does malachas either b'shas hazah or b'shas he's transporting it or he's pouring it. Knows before there was the efer paradoma put on this water, so his malacha causes a psul in this mine. However, b'shas hazah, it doesn't make a psul, and al derech zeh. But after once the efer of the paraduma is on the water, so there's no problem of a person doing malacha while he's having the water. Halacha base. Haschar, getting paid for this act, is poisel b'kiddush of hazoyah. Whereas the act of kiddush, which means sprinkling the ashes of the paraduma onto this mayim chayim, or b'hazoyah, which is sprinkling the water onto the tmei mess with the ezev. So getting paid, say for the kiddush inside of hazoyah, that passes it. Haschar poisel b'kiddush u'b'hazoyah. However, ve'ine poisel b'milui. By milui, it doesn't pass. It was the fact that you got paid for the act of milui. Someone asks you to do the milui amayim, and you get paid for it. That's not a problem. The water is still say the water is kosher to be used for meinida. Masha'inkin, if you put the efer onto the water b'schar, or you do the hazor b'schar, that invalidates it. Ketzad hanetul schari lekadosh mechatos. In order to mekadosh mechatos, which means sprinkling the efer onto the water, eila hazis mem, or to use this mechatos to be maza on this tmei mes, is areis eisen amayim k'mi amorev or efer kefer mikla. In other words, it's as if it's b'chlam not efer paraduma. It's the mayim is like it's not mayim chayim, and the efer is not like it's efer paradum, it's efer mikla. Like the efer of a tanner, it's garnished. Sheini klum. Avol leitul uschar l'malis hamayim. For the mili hamayim, that he's allowed to take schar. Oila hilichon, or to be moilich the mayim, for that he could also take schar. However, umekachin oisim b'chinam. Now once he did for the mili, he could get schar, but for the kiddush has to be b'chinam. And also, mazah, whoever the mazah may be, is also b'chilaf. That's another thing. Hoya mekadesh, hoya mazah zokin she'ini yochel lalech haraglov, and ubo atami ubikash manu lalechim b'mokim rochik, lekadesh lahazes. So the din is hareza markive alachamer. So this person takes him alachamer and he pays for the chamer. So obviously that's not called paying him. He's not getting paid anything. He's just doing it for his convenience. He needs this zokin in order to get him to wherever he wants to get him. So obviously the Zokan is not getting anything from the Markiv el HaChamer. And the Noisim le Ischari Kepeil Bottle Shabotle Meisim Malacha Shabitli Mimenu. And he gives him, he pays him for the amount of money that he lost. In other words, he was working. So this person had a job. And Mamela, he would have gotten paid a certain amount. So the Peil, you have to pay him that job that he lost. He lost that amount of money that he could have made had he not gone with him to this Mokim Rachik. Now the emes is, let's say his job, he would have made a certain amount of money. He's working, he was getting $100 for the job. And Lepeil, he would have rather, this person, you go over to him and say, let me give you money, and you don't do the job. How much money would you be willing to accept and not do the job? So he says, to not do the job, I'd be willing to accept $80. In other words, I need to get paid. So Mele, if you want me to do the job, I'll do it. It's $100. But if you want me not to do the job, in other words, you want me, let's say, to not do the job. Not doing the job is easier for me than doing the job. So I'd rather get less and not do the job than get more and do the job. So how much would you be willing to accept not to do? How much money would you be? Well, instead of doing this job and getting paid $100, how much would you be willing to accept not to do the job? How much would you have to get paid? Not $100, be a little less. So you only have to give them a little less. It's nachamol. So you're asking this person to go with you l'mokim rachik. So you're markiva lachamer, and you give him the schar kepeil bottle shepotel meisim malacha shebitul mimenu. You don't have to give him. It's not every person's the same. Depends what kind of job you have and how much you get paid for the job, and how much you would be willing to not do the job, and how much would you be willing to get paid. Says Neis Lischari Kipel Bottle Shabottle Neis Malacha Shabitli Miman. Now the Rambam is saying it over here. The emphasis is it's by every person. It's not after Zokim, but by every person. The pshat is it normally doesn't take much time. It doesn't take much time to be maza on a Tmei Mes, or it doesn't take much time to be Mekadosh Mechatos. But over here we're talking about a case where he's telling him to go b'mokim rachik. He's telling him to go to Mokim Rachik as Makivi ala Chamer. So maybe we say, no, he's going to Mokim Rachik, so he's going to lose time. No, he's going to lose time, so you have to pay him, Kepeil Bottle. But that din is by everyone. Lav Dafka Zokim. Poshet. V'cheinem hoye koyin, v'hoye tomei b'tuma haminase, haminose melechel b'truma. In other words, you're asking him to go somewhere, and that going somewhere is going to cause him to become tomei, and as a result of the fact that he's becoming tomei, he's not going to be able to eat truma for a while. Whereas for a certain amount of time, he's not going to be able to eat truma. And since he's not going to be able to eat truma, so he's going to have to buy chulin in order to eat. Till now, he was able to eat truma. Truma is cheaper to buy than chulin. Masha'enkin, if you're asking him to become tamei in order to be able to go to a certain place and sprinkle and do this hazor, the kiddush mechatos, so mainly you're giving him a hefsid that he has to buy chulin. So you have to pay him for that hefsid. That's this din. He's asking him to go to a place where he's going to have to be lahazis l'kadish, and the Rvaila, he's going to end up not being able to eat truma because he's going to become tummy, because on the way, let's see, there's a certain truma. So the din is hareza machile umashkile v'soche. He has to give him the food and the drink and also the sicha, the oil for sicha, in order, because to so to speak, to replace the loss that he has of the truma. The Rambam doesn't say that he has to, like, no safkos, he's getting paid to eat, because he would have to pay to eat anyways. It seems like he has truma. No, it could be he wouldn't be buying food. He has enough truma. So maybe he has truma. He says, listen, normally I would eat truma. I have plenty of truma. People give me a lot of truma. Masha'inkim, now you're telling me to go to wherever you tell me to go. So the pale, I'm not going to be able to use my truma. So I'm going to have to buy food. So he has to give him that food. He has to replace him that food. And that's not called paying him. And when b'mitul mimlacha, the while he was also mevatul, this kohen mimlacha, is traveling with him, he's mevatul mimlacha, is also nesel ischare kipel batul shleis mimlacha, which is the pashtus adin. Shekol elu advarim enam schar shenestaker b'kiddush be'azor. It's not a reward. He's getting paid for this kiddush be'azor. Sharei klum. He didn't gain anything. V'le not lo keneged mashayivsid. You're only giving him to make sure that he shouldn't lose. In other words, you're just causing him not to lose, but you're not really giving him any schar. He doesn't come out richer as a result of this act, of what happened over here. Halacha Gimel. Hamemale ba'achas yadi. Now we're going back to the din that work passes b'shas mili. B'shas mili, the work passes. So we learn work passes b'shas mili, and work passes also after the mili while you're responsible for the water. The question is it one din? That's arrived over here. Is it one din or is it two din? I'll call upon it, but the halach is clear that when a person is being mamali the water, and he's doing work while he's being mamali, so he causes a psul in the mind. Halach gimel. Hamamali ba'achas yadi. If a person is filling, is drawing the water, the mayim of the mikveh, the mayim chayim, not the mikveh, the mayim of the mayon, the mayim chayim, and v'oisem malacha b'yadi acheres. And while he was drawing this water, he was doing work with the other hand. Another situation is hamamali loy o la'acher. He's filling up water with two hands. One hand is doing for himself, and one hand is doing for the other person. So lemela, so the fact that he's doing for himself, so that invalidates the mayim that he's filling up for the other person, and the fact that he's filling for the other person causes a psul in the mayim that he's filling up for himself. Oyam shemile l'shnayim kiyachas, or he's being mamale for two separate people. So again, each hand is doing malacha while he's filling up for the other person. Is the din shnayim psulim? Why? Shahamili malacha. Filling up water is called a malacha. And v'nase kol nimtza kol mili mishnayim. The mili of both of these people that he was mamale for, kilo asay malacha acheres. Kvar edainu shamalacha pisel is b'milu. Ben shemila la'atzmei, ben shemila la'acher. So again, so while a person is doing milui, and if he does malacha, so that's a psul. So that's push. Let's go over it again. person's memali with one hand, and let's say with the other hand he does another type of malacha, so for sure it's possible. If a person is memali for himself with one hand, and he's memali for someone else with the other hand, so the mili that he's doing for himself is absul through the mili that he's doing for the other person, because that's as far as himself is concerned, and his mili is concerned. So the mili of the other person is called a malacha, and al derech zeh, the mili that he's doing for the other person is possible because of the mili that he's doing for himself. And al derech zeh, if he's being mamala for two separate people, so the mili that he's doing for each of the two separate people is being nifsal through the mili that he's doing for the other person. That's this thing. Halacha dalet. Hamimali lacher, if a person goes ahead and is mamali for other people, there is one after the other, afilu mili elef chavias zu achar zu le'elef bnei adam, and he went ahead and was mamali 1,000 chavias one after the other, is kulam ksherim, like we learned before, that while a person is being mamali lacherim, while he's being mamali lacherim, so during that mili of malacha pesach, but once he was mamali lacherim, so now that water is the other person's. Now that water is the other person. So the malacha of the mamale is not going to invalidate, it's not going to cause a psul in that water which he was already mamale lacherim. So maybe let's talk two people. A person was mamale for Reuven was mamale for Shimon, and then he was mamale for Levi. So maybe when he was mamale for Shimon, the water was fine. Now when this Reuven goes ahead and he's mamale for Levi, so that water that was mamale for Shimon is no longer under his jurisdiction, is not under his responsibility. So Mela, that the fact that he's doing work to be Mali for Levi is not a problem. That's why it's Kulam Ksherim. Mali Lacherim, Afilu Mili Elef Chavi, Zu Achar Zu Le'elef Bnei Adam, is Kulam Ksherim. V'chol echad nam netel ha'mayim shalei, u'mekacham. Now, Mili La'atzmei Chavis Achar Chavis. What happens if he goes ahead and he was Mali for himself, Chavis Achar Chavis, many Chavis. So here it depends. Basically, he's interested in having one milui. In other words, he's going to take a number of chavis and he's going to fill up. Then he's going to put them all into one large chavis, and then they're going to mekadesh them together. Or it could also be a situation where he fills up one and he pours it into this large chavis, and then again he goes and fills it up again. So he's really in the middle of filling up this chavis. So memel im this chav lekabetz kol lachavis lekeli achod ulahash lechalem b'seifer umekadshim kiddush achod is kulam ksherim. His intent was to make one big mili, to make one big kiddush. So memela, all these, it's not pshat, while he has this water, so he did work with the other water. This water and this water are all part of this one mili. Just like you'll say a person fills up a chavis. So like he filled up the first half and then the second half. So while he's filling up the second half, he's going to invalidate the first half. This is all part of the mili. That's not called work. So therefore, kolam sheim shakel mili yachadu. However, aval nischav kadesh kol chavis v'chavis b'fnei atzmei. He fills up 5 chavis, and his intent is to use to have each chavis a kiddush separately. So then it's kulam sulam. So then they're all possible. Chutz min harishena, chutz min achrena, except for the last one. Why? Shaharishena nifselas b'melacha shasa kedem sheikadish. As a person goes ahead and he's memale one, so that one he's intending on doing a kiddush on that one. So right now that water you're not allowed to do melacha. Now when he goes ahead and he does another mili on another one, and that one is also going to be separate from the first one, so that's considered melacha before the kiddush of the first one, and al derech zeh, etc., etc. So therefore, the only one that didn't have a melacha done was the achrena, chutz min achrena, sharishena nifselas b'melacha shasa kedem sheikadish. V'hu mili hashniya. What was the melacha? The mili hashniya was the melacha that passed the rishena. V'chein hashniya nifselas b'mili hashlishus. V'ein ksheira. So the only one that's kosher is el achrena. That's this din. Now chamisha shemilu chamish chaviyas lekacham chamisha kiddush. There were 5 people that each one had a chavis, and they filled up their chavis, and their intent was that there should be 5 separate kiddushin, that each one should take the ephah para and put it onto his chavis, into the water in his chavis. Kigein sheyashlich ha'ephah al kol achas ve'achas b'fnei atzmei, that the ephah will be on each one separately. And then v'nimlechu, and these 5 people changed their minds, la'arvan u'lekachim kulam kiddush echad. They decided no, that they're going to put it all into one large chavis, and then they're going to make a kiddush echad. That would be one scenario. Oy shemilom lekatshim kiddush echad. Really, the original intent was lekatshim kiddush echad, and then v'nimlechu lekatshim chamisha kiddushim. Is kulam sheirim. There's no problem. Whereas the fact that originally you were intending on doing it separately, and then you decided to do it together, or originally you decided to do it together, and then you decided to do it separately, it's not a problem. Why? Each one filled up the water. The violet was never involved. You didn't get involved in any other type of work after you filled up the water. So the fact that you decided to either put all the water together and make a kiddush echad, or to keep it separate and make a separate kiddushim is not a problem. Aval hayochid shemili chamish chavias lekatshim chamisha kiddushin. If you have a yochid that went ahead and filled up 5 chavias, and that was lekatshim chamisha kiddushim. So we said before that only the achrein is kosher because the second barrel that he filled, the second chavis that he filled, passed the first chavis. In other words, he was mali the first chavis al manas to make a kiddush of the first chavis, and now went ahead and was mali the second chavis. So the milah of the second chavis passed the first chavis. So now, if originally he intended on putting all 5 together, so then it wouldn't have passed. Whereas if he drew 5 chavis, and the intent was to put them all together and make kiddush echad, that wouldn't have passed. Masha'inkin over here, he went ahead and his intent was to make separate kiddush. So Mele did pass. Now the question is, if now he changes his mind and he decides that he wants to make a kiddush echad. Now, if that would have been his mind originally, everything would have been kosher. But since originally his mind was to make separate kiddushim, so Mele it became possible through the second chavis being drawn because he did work after he was mamala the first chavis. So the fact that now he changed his mind to make it all together is not going to cause retroactively that it became kosher. That's what he said. Yeah. Avol, however, how yochid shemili chavish chavis lekatshim chamisha kiddush. There was a yochid that he went ahead and filled 5 chavis, and the purpose was lekatshim chamisha kiddush. And the din was that the only thing that was kosher was the akron. Is afal pi now shechazar v'nimlach lekatshim kiddush echad. Now he decided to take all 5 chavis and put it together. And lechura, if that would have been his original intent, so it would have been kosher. So the din is ain't kosher al akron. The violet, only the akron is kosher. Because lepeil, once they became possible, they can't become kosher. Now milon lekatshim kiddush echad fakert. He was memala them originally lekadish kiddush echad. So he was memala 5 chavis with the intent of kiddush echad. Memela all 5 chavis were kosher. And now v'nimlach lekatshim chamisha kiddushim. And now he decided to be mekadosh them chamisha kiddushim. So the din is ain't kosher elazesha kiddush betchila, because lepel when he's going to go ahead and be mekadosh a kiddush echad to one of them, so lepel that was kosher because lepel the water was kosher. There's nothing wrong with the water, and the kiddush is kosher. But lepel this kiddush is being done before he deals with the other waters. In other words, he has 5 chavis, and each one is a separate chavis, and he was memala them originally l'kadosh kiddush echad. But lepel he has water standing, so if he would have taken memalim kiddush echad, it would have been no problem. But lepel he has water, he has 5 chavis standing, and he's being involved in one of the chavis to be mekadosh that. So that causes the other 4 chavis become puzzle. That's what he says. Milon l'kadosh kiddush echad. So mele the water is all kosher. How lepel v'nimlach l'kadshon chamisha kiddushim is ain't kosher l'zushi kiddush betchila. The one that it was mekadosh betchila is kosher because why not? It was kosher. There was nothing wrong happened with the water. And mainly he was mekadosh it. But the other chavis which are standing while you're being mekadosh, this kiddush echad, you did the work of the mekadosh, the kiddush echad, it passes the other chavis. V'chein im omar le'acher. If he goes ahead to sell someone else, kadosh lecho es elu. He goes ahead to tell someone he was memali 5 chavis. And those 5 chavis was almanas til kachon kiddush echad. And now they're all 5 chavis standing, and he changed his mind, and he wants to have 5 kiddushim, and he tells someone, Kaddish l'choselu, you have these 5 chavis, go ahead and be mekadosh for yourself these 5 chavis. So the din is in kosher l'zushin l'skach ben betchila. When he goes ahead as mekadosh the first, so that's beseder, the water is beseder, the kiddush is beseder. Masha'inkin, once he was mekadosh the first, and since it's his responsibility, all 5, so memela, so there's 4 of them that he did malacha. He all of a sudden assumed responsibility for all 5. This new person, because he said Kaddish L'Chayes Elu. Now, since he assumed responsibility for all five, and he went ahead and he was Mekadosh one, so that Mekadosh one is doing Melacha before he was Mekadosh the others. So B'meila, so they become possible. That's talking about if he said Kaddish L'Chayes Elu. When he says Kaddish L'Chayes Elu, so this person now all of a sudden assumes responsibility for all five. Kaddish Liyas Elu. In other words, the person that's still responsible for all five is the original person. And he has five, which are all kosher, because he originally they were drawn in order to be Mekadosh Kiddush Echad. So the Vaila, all five are kosher. Now he gets someone else, and he says, Kaddish Liyas Elu, you go ahead and be Mekadosh them for me, is Arikulam Kshedim. So you can be Mekadosh all five, Sharei L'Kiddush Echad Milam. The water, there was never a psul in the water because the Kiddush Echad Milam. And the Afal Pishinim L'Chaleim L'Kachem Chamisha Kedushim, even though in the interim he decided to change his mind to be Mekadosh Chamish Kedushim, but Harei Kiddush who Acher Kiddush Lei. If he would have been Mekadosh like we had before, so he would have been doing Malacha during while those four Chavis are standing. But since there's someone else that did the Kiddush, so he's still not doing Malacha. And the other person is doing the Kiddush, and that other person is not really responsible for this water because he said Kaddish Liyas Elu. If he said Kaddish L'Chayes Elu, that person takes the place of the original person. So Mela, just like the original person, if you would Mekadosh one, so that would passel the others. So the person that he said to him Kaddish L'Chayes Elu also would become passel. Mashenka, when he says Kaddish Liyas Elu, so the original person is still the person that's responsible. So as long as he doesn't do any malacha, so Mela, the mind is good. That's it. Halacha Vav. Areitze lemalis mayim lekachon, and he also wants a mayim acherim litzrachav. He needs water for kiddush, mechatas, and he also needs water to drink or whatever. Is the din is so obviously if he's going to go ahead and be memale for kiddush, and then he's going to go ahead and be memale litzrachav, so then that'll be that memile litzrachav will invalidate the water. So the din is memale shel tzrachav tchila. So first he should draw the water which he needs litzrachav, and the koishra v'tein l'acherav. We want that the water that is going to be used for mechatos should be in front of him. He should be able to be shemerit. So he goes ahead and he has, let's say, a stick, and on one side he has water on the back of him, and he has water in the front of him. So he takes this water which he needs litzrachav, and he hangs it and ties it to the back of him. Then he goes ahead and fills the water that he needs for the chatos, for the mechatos. In order for him not to do any work after he does this milah. That's why the water he did litzrachav he did already. And then v'nesin lefanov, and he puts it in front of him. Halacha zayin. You have shnayim, two people, shayim memalim kol echad v'echad li'atzmei. Each one was being memali for him the water, and v'higbiu zeh, and they helped each other put the water on their shoulders. Because you have to carry this water somewhere. So they helped each other put the water on their shoulders. Or v'notel zeh kates miyadi. One of them had a thorn in his hand, and the other one helped and it took the thorn out of his hand. Emi gufa, he would have had a thorn in his flesh, and he took it out of the flesh. B'shas milui, while they were filling up the water. While they were filling up the water, they helped each other either to load it on each other, or they helped each other by taking a thorn out of his hand or his flesh. So now it depends. Im milu shneim l'kiddush echad, if they both draw the water, but their intent was to put the water together and make one kiddush. So basically they were like acting as a team. He was drawing the water and he was drawing the water, but they were really a team because they were going to put the water together and make a kiddush echad. So the mele, just like if a person, for example, puts it on his own shoulder, there's not a problem. So if you put it on someone else's shoulder, which is part of your team, so that's also not a problem because anything that you do to be able to help bringing the water to where it has to go, that's not a problem. The problem is you're doing something that's unrelated to the water. So over here, Aldera is if you're taking out a koitz, if a person is carrying the water and he wants to take the koitz out of his hand to be able to carry the water, so that's not a problem. That's not called he's doing malacha during mili amayim because lepel he needs it letzerich mili amayim. Over here also, if it's letzerich the mili of the other person's mayim, so if that other person's mayim and your mayim are one team shutfis, so then it's beseder. Masha'inkin, if it's not, that's not beseder. That's what he's saying. In milu shneim lekiddush echad, if both of them were memale for one kiddush, so then a mayim ksherim. However, v'milu lekadish kol echad la'atzmei, their intent was each one is going to have their own water and their own kiddush. Is that sheikbir hates yisaketz pasal name of the person that helped the other person with the water, or he helped the other person by taking out the kites from his hand or from his flesh, so that he pasaled his water because he was doing a malacha which was unrelated to his water while he was still responsible for his water, while he was still being mamali his water, while he still had his water. Halacha ches. Hashoyel chevel lemalizbei. Now there's a well that has spring water in it, and he has a pail, a chavis, and he wants to draw the water from the chavis, from the well, but he needs a rope. So he goes ahead and he borrows a rope in order to tie it to the pail, and to be able to get out the water. So Hashoyel chevel lemalizbei, to fill it up, umilei, and he actually filled the water from the well. And lapel, so the rope was hanging all the way down into the well. And then he started bringing the rope back up. So now when he has this rope, which the pail came back up, I'm not 100% sure how this chevel became detached from the pail. In other words, was there an act in detaching it? The Rambam doesn't mention it. He goes ahead and takes this rope, and he puts the water on his shoulder, and he's like schlepping the rope with him. He has this rope that he just took, and he's schlepping the rope with him. And he meets the person that owns this rope. And he gives them the chevel. While he's walking, gives him the chevel. So the din is ksherim. The din is giving back the chevel which he used in order to draw the water. That's not called the ma'aser malach. However, if he went out of his way, in other words, he made sure he went to the bailam in order to give him the chevel, or he went out of his way to meet the bailam in order to give the chevel to the bailam. So then, pasal samayim, because the psul in the mayim, because that's not a ma'aser malachim. If he's schlepping this chevel, which he just took the water with, and now he meets the bailam on the way, so that's not a problem. Halacha tes. Mi shahayim mamali, a person was filling up with this chevel, umashla, or whichever chevel, doesn't make a difference really which chevel. Umashla, it doesn't make a difference if it's talking about the case where he borrowed the chevel, in this case. Umashla chevel shemila be'alor. So while he was pulling up the rope, and with the pail of water, and with the rope, so the rope was falling and hanging on the floor. Va'achar shemila, after he already has all the water, so now he wants to wind up the rope around his hand. He wants to wind this rope around his hand. He doesn't want it just to be hanging on the floor, lying on the floor. He wants to wrap it up on his hand. He wraps it around, so to make it a wrapped rope. Al yadi sus paslam, because that's work. You know, he's going ahead now, and he's now dealing with this rope. However, whereas if while he was schlepping it, so instead of letting it hang on the floor, he was like turning it around his hand. So Mela was becoming turned around his hand, and it was tied nicely, but it was being done while he was bringing up the rope. That's not called he's doing work. That's just a seder of how he's bringing up he has to bring up the dli. So instead of just bringing up the dli and letting the chevel hang and fall on the floor, he went ahead and he was winding it up. That's a seder of schlepping it up. So that's not called he did work after the bringing of the water, drawing of the water. If the chevel was lying on the floor, and after he finished schlepping up, bringing the dli up, he went ahead and wound this rope around, so it should be like a neat pile. So then that's considered work, and that invalidates, that causes a psul in the mind. Halacha yud. Now we're talking about a person. Just look at the stories clearly. A person is drawing water, let's say from a well with a small keli, and his intent is that he's going to take this water and put it into a large barrel and fill it up many times and put it into the large barrel and eventually be makadosh all the water in this large barrel. Now while he was actually drawing the water from the well, he moved with his other hand the barrel. He didn't want the barrel to break. So he moved with his other hand the barrel in order for the barrel not to break. Or he turned over the barrel while he was going ahead with one hand and drawing the water from the well. He was with the other hand turning over the barrel because the barrel was still wet with water that wasn't really water that was roy to be mechata. So therefore that water is going to have to be dried. So he turned it over in order to get the water out, as much water as he can, and eventually dry it. So he was doing something else, but he was doing it l'tzeirich hamili. You know, the purpose of the reason why he moved the chavis, because he wanted the chavis not to break, so he should be able to be malid the water into the chavis. That's going to be the tzerich hamili. And al derech he's turning over the chavis. The reason he's turning over the chavis because he wants the chavis to be dry, and he should be able to be mamali. Eventually, be mamali in the chavis. So he's not doing a work which is unrelated to the milui. He's doing a work which is related to the milui, and therefore that work doesn't passel the water. That's the milui, the ma'isa milui. Nachma Allah chayut. Ha-memale, someone that's being memale from a spring, and v'nesin lechavis, and the intent is he's going to put it into a chavis, achi malenu mayim, that the whole chavis should become filled with water, and then he's going to make the kiddush mechatas. And v'hitznias hachavis, while he was being memale, hitznias hachavis shlei tishaver b'shosha memale. While he was being memale, he pushed away the chavis. He was afraid that maybe something is going to break that chavis. So with his other hand, he pushed away the chavis. The chavis which he wants to put this water in, and eventually put more water in and make the kiddush. Another situation is that while he was being memale, ishakaf al pia al manas lenagva lemalizba, or while he was being memale with this small pail, see, he went ahead and he took with his other hand, he turned over the chavis in order for it to get dry, to dry it, to be able to fill it up with the water that is filling up now from this well. Ishakaf al pia manas lenagva, in order to dry it, lemalizba, to be able to fill it up with water. Is this all kosher? Why? Shizem mitzerich hamilihu. This is not doing another type of work. Whereas he's being memali now. What's he doing? He's doing something which is going to help him with the mili. He's going to take this mili, this water that he's memali, and he's going to put it into the chavis, and eventually put more water into the chavis in order to be able to make the kiddush. So this is all the tzerich hamili. That's talking about when it was l'tzerich hamili. Aval mitzniyah nigva. He had no intention of filling up the water in this chavis. The intent was that he's going to have a kiddush mechatos in the pail that he's filling up with, and eventually after the kiddush he's going to pour into this chavis. So this chavis is going to be needed for the process of the water, but not for the mili of the water, but rather for the transporting of the mayim mekudashim. Aval mitzniyah nigva kedei lehelech b'yis hakiddush. In order to transport the mayim mekudashim is possible. So then, doing something with this barrel, which the intent of doing it is not l'tzerich hamili, but l'tzerich, what he's going to do with it after the kiddush, that's possible. Shari yasim malacha she'ena l'tzerich hamili. He did a malacha which wasn't l'tzerich hamili, and he did it before there was the kiddush. The same thing would be hamamale v'nesin l'shekes. Person fills up water, and is filling up water from a well, and he's putting it into a shakes. Pasha we're talking about a shakes, which is roy to be a keli. It's considered a keli because it was first detached and then it was reattached, like we learned before. And then upina chasis mina shakes b'shas mili. While he was being memali this water, so there was a piece of shard in this shakes, and he took the shard out of the shakes while he was filling up the pail with water. So it depends, why did he take out the shard? In b'shvil shetavzik mayim rab, knows he's going to take the water out of the well, and now he's going to pour it into this shakers, but he wants that the shaker should have more room, so the shard takes up room. So Memele, he took the shard out in order that there should be more room for the mayim that he's filling up. So then it's ksheir, because sharei zutzer chamili, because this is part of the process of the mili. You know, what he's doing right now, taking the shard out of the shakers, is something which is l'tzer chamili. However, v'im b'shvil shaliyach haros makfanesa b'shoshu zelev v'samayim shemila b'shakers, he's going to fill it up in the shakers, and then eventually he's going to be mekadosh the water in the shakers, and then he's going to go ahead and take this water out of the shakers and put it into other kelim, and he doesn't want the shard to be a hindrance when he's going to be taking the water out of the shakers after there was already the kiddush. So basically, it has nothing to do with the milui process. Whereas in the case before, when he's taking the shard out, in order there should be more place for the water, for the milui, so it's part of the milui process. Mashenkin over here, the intent of taking the shard out is in order for it to be easier to take out the mayim ukudoshim from the shakers when he's going to want to transport it, so then that's considered a malacha. It's not l'tzerich hamilui. So therefore, shul yacharos ma'akvanese, v'im b'shvil shul yacharos ma'akvanese, b'shah shul zelev v'samayim shemila b'shakers, when he's going to pour out the water from the shakers into the kalim, So he's going to pour out the water mikudashim. So then it's a reil psul. That would be a psul. So such an act would be a psul. Halacha Yudalef. Hamemali dli lishtes v'nimlach v'chishav olav l'meichatos. So let me just say Adumah. When a person goes ahead and fills up water from a mayan in order to use for mechatos, so if he has a intending of filling it up for the mechatos, so that's perfectly good. If he intends of using this water for something else, he just fills it up for drinking water, so then pasha that he can't use this water for mechatos. I mean, it's noch mit akal v'chemer. Madoch if while he's filling up water for mechatos, he goes ahead and fills up other water for drinking water. So it invalidates the water that he did for mechatos. So if this water itself was for drinking water, so the chavade, it's not royal mechatos. Now, the pail, if a person, let's say, starts pulling a pail down into a well, and he starts pulling it down in order to drink. But then before the actual pail got into the well, he decided, no, I want to use it for mechatos. So on minateidik level, there's no problem. Because the pail, he didn't do, nothing happened yet. He just pulled the pail down. The water, it didn't go into the water yet. He doesn't have the water yet. So the mele is pashut that he's allowed to use this water, minatera, for mechatos. However, midrabanan, since he started putting down the pail in order to drink, so that water that even though he decided before the pail hit the water that he's gonna not drink it, but he's gonna use it for mechatos, but nevertheless, when the pail hits the water and takes that water is invalid. That's a din under the Rabbanan Dikadin. So what does he have to do? He has to go and pour out this water. He brings back the sort of pail. He pours out the water. He pours out the water into the well. Al kol pan, he pours out the water, and once he pours out the water, so now he could go ahead and again do the drawing of the water. The whole drawing of the water is l'shem mechatas. That's on a Rabbanan Dika level. Now, since it's only on a Rabbanan Dika level, so he doesn't have to really dry the water. Normally, when you have mamish water that's not kosher, the mechatos, so you not only have to pour it out, you have to actually dry the pail to make sure that the pail has no remnants of that water which is not kosher. Since over here, me'ikim minatere really is kosher, it's only midrabanan, so therefore the Rabbanan didn't insist that you have to dry it. Masha'inkin, if there would be a situation where you actually put the water down, you put the pail down into the water, and the purpose was in order to get drinking water. So now that water is definitely possible for mechatos. Now you decided you want to have mechatos. So now you have to pour out that water. Now you have to pour out the water. Just pouring out the water is not going to be enough. Now you're going to have to also dry the pail because now this water is possible on a deraisa level. That's Allah Yidal Pasha. Hamemali dli lishtes. He's filling up a dli in order to drink. And v'nimlach, while he's pulling down this dli into the well, v'nimlach v'chishav alav l'mechatos. So the din is azay. Im actually giad dli l'mayim chishav, if he decided for mechatos before the dli actually hit the water. So and then the pail he went and put the well into the water. The dli into the water, but it was like he really brought it down in order to draw it for drinking water. So Memela Midrabon, he has to be Ma'ari, he has to pour out that water, he can't use that water. However, because since it wasn't really Mamash Absum and Atera, so therefore the Chacham didn't institute that you have to dry it. However, Mishigi Adli Lemayim Chishav, the pail was already in the water, and now the pail is in the water in order to get drinking water. And now he decided that he wants to get water which is for mechatos. So over here is Ma'ari, he has to pour out that water, because that water, which the pail was already in the water, is obviously not good. And also, Vitzarech Nagav not only has to pour out the water, but he has to make sure that the pail is dry, and then he fills it up for Rechatos. Now, Shilshil Adli, if he was bringing the Dli down, and V'nifsa Kachevel Miyodeh, and the Chevel just fell down. In other words, it ripped. Is imad surely the chevel fell. In other words, it got broken. So now the dli came into the water. Now and he was filling it up. He was letting the dli down, and lepel the chevel dropped, and he was letting the chevel down in order to get drinking water. Is imad surely giad dli lemay chishav olav again before the actual pail hit the water. So he was bringing it down in order to have drinking water. And lepel, it never really came down by itself. It dropped. It fell. So the din is again ma'ara ve'inin tzarich l'nagav, which is the same din like we had before. Now nimlach v'hu oideh v'techamayim. If he changed his mind while it was already in the water, and v'chishav olav l'mechatos, and then he changed his mind and he wants it to be l'mechatos. So over here it says ma'ara, he pours it out ve'inin tzarich l'nagav. That's the Girsa and Rambam. Because the Mishnah changes the Girsa and says no, ma'ara over here it's also tzarich l'nagav. Because since sof kol sof it came into the water. It came into the water, and it was originally intent. He was bringing it in. He was bringing it in order to get drinking water. So therefore, it's like in the previous case. Just like in the previous case, it's tzarich l'nagav. Over here also tzarich l'nagav. That's how the because Mishnah changes the girsa. Not arav ain't tzarich l'nagav. Arav it's tzarich l'nagav. Others want to learn that know that it's takav ain't tzarich l'nagav. Because over here it didn't actually notice. In the previous case, you actually pulled it down. You yourself brought it down into the water in order for it to be for drinking water. Mashenkan over here, you started pulling it down for drinking water, but you never actually brought it down into the well for the drinking water because it was nifsek achavel and it fell into the water. And then you went ahead and you changed your mind. But I'll call upon him. It's still not kosher the mechatos because lepel it was never intentional mechatos. I'll call upon him because the Mishnah changes the gears and says tzarich l'nagav. Mayim shemilu l'mechatos. Someone filled up mayim l'mechatos. V'achar shemismali, and after he filled it up, chishav aleim l'shteisim. He decided that he wants to drink them. So the fact that he decided that he wants to drink it doesn't passel the water. However, kshiyates akeli lishtes, when he starts bending the keli in order for him to be able to drink, is passel amayim. Afal pishla shasim klum. So when he starts tilting the keli in order for him to drink, so that already causes a psul in this mayim.